Hey guys, all right, let's talk about what happened in Cyrano. We are nearing the end of this act. So we were to have read through page 521. So on page 516, remember Cyrano has come to visit Roxanne. She doesn't know that he's been injured, and he's sitting there talking with her, and all of a sudden he faints. Right, so now she realizes something's wrong. She goes over there. What is it? What is it? And he's like, "Oh no, it's nothing. It's just my old wound from Arras and from the battle. It's just my old wound is bothering you." And Roxanne's like, "Oh, my poor friend." And he's like, "It's nothing. Don't worry. It'll soon pass." And then he kind of like forces a smile and says, "Okay, it's gone. I'm fine now." And Roxanne says, "Well, we all have our wounds, and mine is here. Her wounded heart." And then she's like, "I have this, letter still, and it has the blood and the tears on it." And Cyrano's like, "Oh, his letter." He's like, "Do you remember that you promised me that one day that you would let me read it?" Roxanne's like, "Yes, his letter. Do you want to read it?" And Cyrano's like, "Yes, I do want to read it today." So she's like, "Okay." So she takes it out. Remember, she's been wearing it around her neck. So she takes it off and she hands it to him. And so he opens it and starts reading it. "Farewell, Roxanne, because today I die." And Roxanne's like, "You mean you're reading out loud?" And Cyrano's just keeps reading out loud. "I know it will be today, and I love you and stuff." And Roxanne's like, "Wow, how you read the letter, you read it so," and she's listening as he's reading it out loud, and she's like, that voice, that sounds familiar. You're reading it in a voice that I remember hearing long ago. And she's thinking back to when he was under the balcony, remember, speaking for Christian. And so she comes over to him and he's continuing to read the letter. "And I shall still be that one who love you beyond measure, beyond." And she lays her hand on his shoulder and she says, "How can you read this now? It's dark." So of course he's not reading it at all. He's reciting it because he had all those words, memorized in his memory. And so she realizes that he is the one. It all comes dawning on her when she hears him reading the letter, reminds her of that voice from years ago. He's reading it in the dark. There's no way he could see the letter, and yet he's reading it. So now she finally figures out that it was him. And she says, "All after all these 14 years, you've been a friend who's come to see me just to be amusing." And she's like, "It was you." And he's like, "No, no, Roxanne." And he denies, he keeps trying to deny it. She's like, "Yeah, it was you. I should have known. Every time I heard you speak my name." He's like, "No, no, no, it wasn't me." And she's like, "I get it now. I understand it. All the letters, everything, it was you." And he's like, "No." And all those words, the soul, all of it was you. And he's like, "No." And he keeps trying to say no, it wasn't me. He's trying to deny it. And he's like, "No, I never loved you." And she's like, "Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You loved me." He's like, "No, no, no, Christian, he loved you." And she's like, "Even now, you still love me." And he tries to deny it, right? But she doesn't believe him because she knows the truth. And she's like, "You knew there's tears, the tears on the letters, that's you." And Cyrano is like, "Well, but the blood was his." She's like, "Well, why are you telling me now? Like, why are you breaking your silence now, today? Why are you telling me?" And Cyrano's like, "Why? Well, because." And just at that moment, Lebret and Ragueneau come running in because remember, they know what's happened to him. They're trying to find him. They come running in. They're like, "I knew it. I knew he was here." And he's like, "Yes, I'm here." And Ragueneau says to Roxanne, "Madame, he has killed himself in coming here." And she's like, "What? What?" Because she didn't know. She's like, "Ah, remember how he fainted?" So she's like, "That faintness here." And Cyrano's like, "Oh, just you didn't let me finish my Gazette." So on Saturday 26th, an hour or so before dinner, Monsieur de Bergerac died, foully murdered. And he takes off his hat, and when he does, she can see how it's all wrapped up in all those bandages. So she's like, "Cyrano, what is going on? What has happened to you? What happened to you?" And he's like, "Well, I've been killed by a log of wood that was dropped on my head." He's like, "Isn't that funny?" Because he always thought he would die by the sword, right? And so that's what he meant when he says, "I've missed everything, even my own death." Because he was expecting his death to be, in a battle or in a fight, and instead somebody drops a log on his head, and that's how he dies. And so Ragueneau starts, blubbering and getting upset, and Cyrano's like, "Stop, stop your blubbering." And then they tell him, Ragueneau and Lebret tell him that, hey, Ragueneau says Moliere, who is a playwright, he's like, he played um, they played one of his plays yesterday and he stole one of your scenes. But Brett says, yeah, the whole scene, word for word. And Reginald says, yeah, he took the whole scene and used it and stole it from you. And Cyrano's like, you know, it's no big deal. He showed good taste. Did it go well? And Reginald's like, oh, yeah, it went very well. They laughed and they laughed. It was great. And so Cyrano's like, well, that's been my life, right? Basically, somebody else, gets the glory for what I do. He wrote all the letters, and Christian got the kiss and got to marry the girl, and now he wrote the scene, but Moliere gets the praise, and that's where we ended on page 521. So for tomorrow, so today you need to read the rest. You're going to finish it up 521 to 526. Then tomorrow we'll talk about what happened, and you want to make sure that you watch the video before you take your quiz.